Aliyah Boston could barely contain her emotions the moment the news became official. Bree Hall, her sister in spirit from their days of dominance at South Carolina, was joining her once again. But this time, they weren't just Gamecocks. They were Fever. And this reunion, deeply personal and profoundly symbolic, would set the stage for something electric in the WNBA. The world of professional basketball is filled with transactions, trades, drafts, and departures. It's a business, and often, emotional attachments are sacrificed for strategy. But sometimes, the universe weaves a story so poetic it almost defies the harsh nature of sports. That's precisely how it felt for Aliyah Boston, who had been carrying the Indiana Fever on her back with grace and grit since being drafted number 1 overall in 2023, when she learned that Bree Hall, her former teammate, friend, motivator, and near sister, would be wearing the same jersey again. For fans, this reunion was sweet. For Boston, it was overwhelming. The emotions stemmed not just from their on-court chemistry but from the years they spent pushing each other to greatness at South Carolina. It was in those long, grinding practices, in the huddles during tight NCAA battles, and in the silent moments walking back to the dorms after both victories and heartbreaks that the bond was truly forged. Bree Hall wasn't just another player to Boston, she was part of her journey, part of her growth, and someone who knew her not as a WNBA star, but as the young girl chasing dreams before the world noticed. Aliyah Boston's dominance in the NCAA was legendary, but she often deflected praise, instead crediting her teammates, her coaches, and the culture that Dawn Staley cultivated at South Carolina. Among those teammates, Hall stood out not just for her own talent but for the unique support and chemistry she shared with Boston. During press conferences, Boston would often refer to Hall as someone who never let the energy drop. She called her the spark behind the scenes, and always smiled when reporters brought up Bree's name. So when Bree Hall finally declared for the WNBA draft after completing her senior year, a season in which she showed marked maturity and leadership, there was quiet but powerful hope among South Carolina fans that perhaps the stars would align. Boston herself had been vocal in subtle, heartfelt ways. Social media posts, quiet likes, comments that simply said family all hinted that she missed having Hall around, both personally and professionally. What few people outside their inner circle knew, however, was that Boston had been advocating behind closed doors for the Fever to consider Hall. She knew that the WNBA was a different beast, and she believed Hall had the mentality and toughness to rise to the occasion. But more than that, Boston believed that having Hall beside her again would not only bring joy but reignite the kind of synergy that had once made South Carolina the most feared team in the country. When the Fever's front office made the call and brought Bree Hall into the fold, Boston's reaction was immediate. She didn't wait for a press release or a formal statement. She posted a simple image, a throwback of them hugging after a Final Four win, with a caption that read, "Back where we belong." But behind that post was a storm of emotions. In interviews that followed, Boston admitted to crying when she heard the news. "It's hard to explain what Bree means to me," she said through teary eyes. "She's not just a teammate. She's part of my story. We've been through everything together: early morning lifts, the pressure of championships, injuries, late-night talks about the future, all of it. To have her here now, in this next chapter, it just feels right." Hall, too, was emotional. In her first media availability, she described Boston as her anchor and called her the most unselfish star I've ever played with. Hall shared that during her darkest moments, when injuries lingered and her role at South Carolina fluctuated, Boston was the one who always reassured her, always made her feel seen and valued. "There were nights when I doubted if I could ever play at the next level," Hall said. "Aliyah always reminded me who I was. She saw me, even when I didn't see myself." The Indiana Fever, still in the process of reshaping their identity and rising in the league standings, suddenly had a deeper story unfolding. The arrival of Caitlin Clark had already turned the franchise into a national spectacle. Now, with Hall and Boston reuniting, there was an emotional backbone that few teams could claim. The locker room now held the kind of camaraderie that can't be manufactured or scripted. It's real, and it's rare. Coaches noticed immediately. During training camp, head coach Christy Sides remarked that the connection between Boston and Hall was telepathic. Plays didn't need to be called, Hall would move off the ball in a certain way, and Boston would instinctively hit her with a perfect pass. Defensive switches happened without verbal cues. They've got that sixth sense thing, one assistant coach said. It's like they're two halves of one brain out there. But it wasn't just about on-court execution.